It is by far the most significant biological disturbance agent in the mature forests of western North America.
Nobody expected 80% of the pine forest to die within a decade.
Red is the key word there. Red and dead.
You're starting to have too much dead pine trees, which will be a big fire in the future.
If the sort of more pessimistic projections are true, some of these towns will certainly have very large economic losses.
This is, for all intents and purposes, directly related to global warming, and therefore it's a global issue.
Mountain pine beetle is a native insect that belongs to a group of forest insects known as bark beetles. And basically bark beetles feed in the succulent tissue beneath the bark, between the bark and the sapwood of trees. And it's usually the female that initiates attacks. And so if she finds a tree that she potentially might like to colonize, she'll land on the bark of that tree, taste the tree, and if it's to her liking, she'll actually begin boring through the bark. In the process of boring through the bark, she releases aggregation pheromones which attract more mountain pine beetles, mostly males, of course. The males arrive to mate with the females, and they begin boring through the bark along with the females, helping her. And together, these activities lead to a mass attack.
The second strategy is the beetles carry with them a pathogenic fungus called blue sting. The spores germinate very quickly and penetrate the nearby living cells, killing them.
It's the cutting of the phloem tissue and the plugging of the xylem tissue, let's say. Basically the way in which the tree actually moves nutrients and water up and down its stem that leads to tree death. And it happens very quickly when the beetle finishes colonizing the tree. Normally, the populations of beetles exist at extremely low levels, in which they're just sort of background beetles, largely innocuous, functioning with other bark beetle species to kill the damaged and suppressed trees in the forest. It's just a natural component of the forest, and what we call a self-thinning process. In other words, they're picking off the weakened individuals, leaving the healthy ones to survive. That's normally how mountain pine beetle functions.
The winter of 97-98 was the last time that we had one of those real cold killing winters, the winters that will kill the pine beetle on a large scale. And by that I mean whether that's 30 below or colder for 3 weeks or 4 weeks.
We simply don't get those 30 below cold snaps anymore for that long of a period. We may get a day or two, but certainly not what it was like 20 years ago, where we used to get anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks a year where we'd have those type of temperatures constantly.
Like February is supposed to be the cold month,
Yeah.
and it's not. It's where I can walk outside with a shirt on and it's not cold. Should be 25 below right now.
And so when you have that old pine in such large contiguous expanses out there, combined with the lack of cold winters since 1998, the situation became ideal for the expansion of the epidemic.
And in the beginning, we start to see a spot here and a spot there, and a single tree here and a single tree there, which is very easy to miss in aerial surveys. Then all of a sudden these things start to spread out, and you're seeing a patch here and a patch there, and then next thing you know, the patches have congealed into one huge area.
It's fair to say that the epidemic is so extensive in most parts of the interior, west of the Alberta border, that it doesn't make sense anymore to put limited resources into spread control. I would characterize three really big areas of concern. In British Columbia, First Nations live largely outside of major urban centers. When you have a pest go through a forest on a scale like this, in some instances, a large proportion of a given First Nations traditional territory will be affected. And it'll impair the ability of First Nations in some cases to practice their traditional practices.
In a non-native world, we were poor, but in our home world, with our fish and our wildlife and our medicines, we considered ourselves rich. But now even that is in jeopardy. So now we need to adapt and battle.
That's one major area of concern. The other one is in the interior of BC, lodgepole pine, which is the main host for pine beetle. Lodgepole pine represents about 50% of the commercial timber that society would have planned to harvest over the next number of decades, and take all the economic benefits that come from that timber harvesting, all the job creation, revenue to the provincial government, and so on. So over time, as this pine timber that's been killed by the pine beetle becomes unusable for commercial products, we will start to see economic impacts in communities in the epidemic zone.
When our volumes are diminished, I don't know what the projections are, probably in the neighborhood of 40% or so, then we're going to have to either move into other regions and get that cut out of those regions, or slow down the milling of logs here.
The third area of concern broadly is with regard to impacts on the natural environment.
When this snow melts, there's no canopy to stop that heat from melting that so fast. All the creeks were over flooding. I mean, we're feeling the effects of it now. You can see it with the animals, and through the river systems, the fishing, everything is being devastated. We're just about there on a global change right now.
The effects of climate change on mountain pine beetle are very obvious, yet a bit subtle. Mountain pine beetle's favorite host tree, lodgepole pine, goes all the way up to the Yukon and Northwest Territories and halfway across Alberta. But a lot of those areas to the north and northeast were historically unavailable because it was too cold in the wintertime or too cool in the summer, so mountain pine beetle couldn't make a living there. And what has happened is that those areas have been gradually warming further north and further east, and as a consequence, mountain pine beetles have been moving quite rapidly into these new habitats once they become climatically benign or suitable to the beetle's development.
And that's where the scary part comes, is this little triangle here leads towards the boreal forest, and into this area we start getting a hybrid between lodgepole pine and jack pine, and the beetle's quite happy in jack pine as well, as we found out from various lab experiments. Once it gets going in this, if weather permits, the jack pine forest runs all the way across Canada to the east coast.
And so, in my opinion, it's probably not going to go away to the extent that it has historically, simply because there's going to be newer areas opening up as the climate continues to warm.
We always talk about looking after our children, doing what's best for our children. Yet it all seems like talk. We need to start taking actions before it's too late.